The winter wind of Chicago cut through the empty streets like a sharp blade, carrying tiny flakes of ice that sparkled under the yellow glow of old streetlights. Mark Reynolds pulled his scarf tighter as he stepped off the late bus. It was close to midnight. The long shift at the warehouse had left his shoulders stiff and his back aching, but he kept walking with the steady pace of a man used to tired nights. For 4 years, this routine had been his life. Work, home, care for his son, repeat. Mark was 43 with lines of quiet strength around his eyes. He had been a widower since the sudden illness that took his wife, Laura. Their son, Ben, now 12, was the center of his world. Mark worked extra hours to keep the small brick duplex warm, the refrigerator full, and Ben's life steady. Even in the middle of a Chicago winter, he never let himself slack. Ben depended on him, and that thought kept him moving when the rest of the city seemed asleep. As Mark turned down his street, a shape at the bus stop caught his attention. At first he thought it was a bundle of blankets left behind, the kind the city sometimes used to cover benches. But something about the outline made him slow his steps. The shape shifted slightly. A thin arm moved. Someone was sitting there. Mark's breath clouded the air as he came closer. A young girl sat hunched on the icy metal bench. Her sneakers were wet, her jeans dark with melted snow. A thin jacket hung loose over her shoulders. She hugged herself as if she could hold back the cold through sheer will. Mark stopped a few feet away. Chicago nights could be dangerous, and he knew better than to approach strangers carelessly. Yet there was something about the way she sat, small, tense, almost hidden, that stirred an old memory of loneliness in him. "Hey," he said gently, his voice carrying across the quiet street. "Are you okay?" The girl flinched and looked up. Under the streetlight, her face appeared pale, with a scatter of freckles across her nose. She couldn't have been more than 16. Her lips trembled, though whether from fear or cold, Mark couldn't tell. "I'm fine," she whispered, but the words lacked strength. Mark stepped a little closer, his boots crunching on the icy sidewalk. "It's freezing out here." "Where are you headed?" She shook her head quickly. "Nowhere." Her eyes darted left and right as if she expected someone to jump out of the shadows. Mark noticed the way she pulled her coat tighter around her middle, and that was when he saw it. Beneath the oversized sweatshirt, the gentle roundness of a belly showed. He felt a jolt of understanding. She was pregnant. Mark hesitated, his breath hanging in the air. He could hear Laura's voice in his memory, kind, warm, always ready to help someone in need. He cleared his throat softly. "There's a shelter on Maple Street," he offered. "It's warm. They'll help you." The girl's reaction was immediate and full of panic. "No," she said quickly, almost sharply. "No shelters." "Why not?" Mark asked, keeping his tone calm. "They'll call people." She hugged herself tighter. "I can't go there." Her fear was real. Mark could see it in her eyes, the way they shone under the streetlight. He thought of the nights after Laura's death when he had felt trapped by grief, cornered by life. He recognized that same look. He spoke carefully. "My place is just down the street. I have coffee, blankets, no questions if you don't want to talk. Just come in from the cold for tonight." The girl's shoulders shook. She looked toward the dark street, then back at him. Finally, she gave a tiny nod. The walk to the duplex was short, but the wind made it feel longer. Mark unlocked the door and ushered her inside. Warmth met them immediately. The steady hum of the old radiator, the faint smell of cinnamon from the tea Ben and Mark had shared earlier. The girl blinked at the small living room, with its worn but clean sofa and a stack of board games in the corner. Mark hung his coat and motioned for her to sit. "Here," he said, grabbing a quilt from the back of the couch and wrapping it around her shoulders. "This should help." She sat stiffly, her hands gripping the edges of the quilt. Her fingers were red from the cold. Mark headed to the kitchen and filled a mug with hot cocoa, adding a few marshmallows the way Ben liked it. When he returned, he placed the mug on the coffee table. "Careful, it's hot." She stared at the steam for a moment before taking a small sip. Color began to return to her cheeks. "My name's Mark," he said quietly. "You don't have to tell me yours if you're not ready." She kept her eyes on the mug. A long silence stretched between them. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "Lily." "That's a pretty name," Mark replied. "Lily, how far along are you?" Her hand moved protectively to her belly. 7 months, she admitted, voice breaking. "The baby's father, he's gone. My mom said I ruined everything. She told me to leave." The words hung in the warm air like falling snow. Mark felt a deep ache in his chest. He thought of Ben upstairs, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the quiet storm in the living room. He thought of Laura, who had always believed every person deserved kindness. "You can stay here tonight," Mark said finally. "No strings, no judgment. We'll figure out what to do in the morning." Lily's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, whispering, "Thank you, later." After making sure Lily was settled on the couch with extra blankets, Mark climbed the stairs to check on Ben. The boy slept soundly, his favorite baseball cap resting on the nightstand. Mark brushed a hand over his son's hair and felt the familiar rush of love and responsibility. In his own room, Mark lay awake for a long time. The radiator hissed softly and the wind rattled the window panes. He thought of the girl sleeping below, of her unborn child and of the fragile thread of trust she had given him. His life was already a careful balance, long hours at work, bills that always seemed to grow faster than his paycheck, and the constant wish to give Ben a happy childhood. Taking in a stranger, a pregnant teenager, was not a simple act. It could change everything. Yet deep inside, Mark felt a quiet certainty. He could not turn her away. Meeting Lily felt less like chance and more like something he was meant to do. He closed his eyes and pictured Laura's gentle smile. In the darkness, he could almost hear her voice, calm and sure. Don't let her face this alone. Outside, the wind howled through the Chicago streets. Inside, a small spark of hope flickered, the beginning of something neither Mark nor Lily could yet name. But both would remember this night, the night a single father opened his door and a frightened young girl found a moment of safety. As the first step toward a future none of them could imagine, a pale winter sun slipped through the thin curtains of Mark Reynolds' kitchen, casting soft stripes across the table. The smell of fresh coffee drifted through the small duplex as Mark moved quietly, careful not to wake his son upstairs. He had slept only a few hours, his mind turning over the same questions again and again. Who was Lily? Where would she go next? And what would it mean for him and Ben if she stayed? He glanced into the living room. Lily was still asleep on the couch, wrapped in the quilt like a small bird in a nest. Her breathing was slow and even. For the first time, her face looked peaceful, free of the fear that had shadowed her the night before. Mark felt a tug of relief. At least she was warm. The sound of creaking steps made him turn. Ben appeared, rubbing his eyes, his hair sticking up in all directions. "Morning, Dad," Ben mumbled. Then he stopped, noticing the stranger on their couch. "Who's that?" Mark motioned for him to keep his voice down. "Her name is Lily. She needed a safe place to stay last night. We'll talk more after breakfast, okay?" Ben's curiosity sharpened, but he nodded. He had grown up watching his father help neighbors shovel snow or fix a loose door hinge without expecting anything in return. He trusted that if someone was in their home, his dad had a reason. When Lily finally stirred, the kitchen smelled of toast and scrambled eggs. She sat up slowly, blinking at the morning light. For a moment she looked startled, as if she had forgotten where she was. Then she noticed Mark standing in the doorway, a gentle smile on his face. "Morning," he said softly. "Coffee or maybe just water?" "Water, please," Lily answered, her voice still rough with sleep. She followed him to the table, holding the quilt around her shoulders. Ben offered a shy "hi," and she managed a small smile in return. Mark set a glass of water in front of her. "You can stay as long as you need to get warm and figure things out," he said. "But I need to know if there's anyone we should call. Family, a friend?" Lily shook her head. "There's no one," she said quietly. "My mom told me to leave. I tried staying with a friend, but her parents said no. I don't have anywhere else." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of cold nights and slammed doors. Ben looked at her with wide eyes, then at his father. Mark's chest tightened. He wanted to protect her, but he also knew how complicated this could become. "You don't have to decide anything right now," he said. "Eat first." The three of them shared breakfast. Ben asked gentle questions, what music she liked, whether she had a favorite sport. Lily answered in short sentences, but her shoulders slowly relaxed. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, someone was treating her like a person instead of a problem. After the dishes were cleared, Mark sat across from her. "Lily," he began, "I can offer you a place to stay for a few days, just until we figure out something more permanent, but we need to be careful. There are people, Social workers whose job is to help in situations like this. They can make sure you and your baby are safe. Fear flickered across her face. They'll send me back, she said. Or take the baby. No one is going to take your baby for no reason, Mark replied, keeping his voice calm. They might help with doctors or a better place to stay. You deserve that support. Lily looked down at her hands, silent. Mark didn't press. He remembered how hard it had been for him to accept help after Laura died. Trust took time. The day passed quietly. Mark called into work, explaining that a family emergency kept him home. He and Ben shoveled the walkway while Lily rested on the couch with a borrowed blanket and a stack of magazines. At lunchtime, Ben brought her a grilled cheese sandwich and sat beside her. Do you like video games? He asked. A little, Lily said, a small smile tugging at her lips. We can play later, Ben offered. Mark watched from the kitchen doorway. He saw something soften in Lily's expression, a flicker of comfort he hadn't seen before. In the afternoon, Mark drove Lily to a nearby clinic for a prenatal checkup. She had skipped her last appointment, worried about questions she couldn't answer. The nurse spoke kindly, checking the baby's heartbeat, explaining each step. Lily listened, tears bright in her eyes when she heard the steady thump of life inside her. On the drive home, she stared out the window. Thank you, she said quietly. For everything. You don't have to thank me, Mark replied. Everyone deserves kindness. That evening, snow began to fall soft and heavy. Mark made a simple dinner, chicken soup and warm bread. They ate together at the small table, the house filled with the smell of garlic and herbs. For a moment, it felt almost like a family meal. After Ben went to bed, Lily lingered at the table. Why are you helping me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark thought of Laura. Her laughter, her belief that small acts of care could change a life. Because someone once helped me when I needed it, he said. And because I think you and your baby deserve a chance. Lily looked down, a single tear tracing her cheek. No one's ever said that to me before. You deserve to hear it, Mark said. Later, as Mark washed the dishes, he reflected on the day. He knew challenges lay ahead. Keeping Lily and the baby safe would take more than warm meals and kind words. There would be paperwork, questions, maybe even disapproval from neighbors or relatives. But as he watched her fold the quilt neatly on the couch before lying down, he felt a quiet certainty. Something about her presence filled a space in the house that had been empty since Laura's passing. He wasn't looking for a new chapter. Life had given him one anyway. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in a soft, white blanket. Inside, the small duplex glowed with the steady warmth of hope. Mark didn't know what the next days would bring, but he sensed that the girl he had met in the cold was about to change all of their lives, his, Ben's, and her own, in ways he could not yet imagine. The days that followed settled into a quiet rhythm inside Mark Reynolds' small Chicago duplex. Outside, winter stayed stubborn, with gray skies and sidewalks buried beneath layers of ice. Inside, warmth slowly spread, not just from the old radiator, but from the gentle way 3 lives began to share the same space. Each morning, Mark rose early to make breakfast before heading to his warehouse job. Ben packed his school books while Lily sat at the table, sipping tea and rubbing her growing belly. She still wore the borrowed quilt across her shoulders, though now she smiled when Ben teased her about it. Best blanket in the house, she would say, and Mark would see a spark of playfulness flicker across her face. Mark kept his promises. No questions she wasn't ready to answer, no pressure about her next step. Yet little by little, Lily offered small pieces of her story. One snowy afternoon, while Mark shoveled the walk and Ben worked on math homework, she joined Mark outside, her breath forming soft clouds in the cold air. I used to like winter, she said quietly, watching her boots leave prints in the snow. Before everything got complicated, Mark leaned on the shovel. What changed? She hesitated. When I told my mom I was pregnant, she said I ruined her life. She didn't care about how scared I was. I packed a bag and left that night. Thought I could stay with a friend, but her parents said no. I've been wandering since. Mark's chest tightened. He wanted to tell her she deserved better, but he simply nodded, letting her speak. I thought I could handle it, she continued. But the nights got colder and I started to think maybe I wouldn't make it. Then you showed up. Mark met her eyes. Sometimes life gives us the right people at the right moment, he said. She looked down, blinking fast. I'm glad you stopped. One evening, Mark returned from work to find Ben and Lily laughing over a board game. The sight surprised him. Ben's cheeks were flushed with excitement, and Lily looked almost carefree, a light in her eyes he hadn't seen before. We're tied, Ben announced, but I'm about to win. Not if I roll a 6, Lily said, shaking the dice with mock drama. Mark set down his bag and smiled. Look serious in here. It is, Ben said. Winner gets the last cookie. Lily laughed, and the sound filled the house like music. For the first time since Laura's passing, Mark felt the weight in his chest lift just a little. Still, Mark knew they couldn't hide from reality. He spent late nights researching resources for young mothers. He spoke quietly with a local social worker named Mrs. Carter, who promised to respect Lily's privacy while offering prenatal care and legal guidance. When Mark mentioned the idea to Lily, she stiffened. I don't want strangers deciding my future, she said. They won't decide anything, Mark explained gently. They can give you options. You deserve to know what's possible. She looked uncertain but didn't say no. One Saturday morning, Mark drove them all to the community center, where Mrs. Carter had arranged a private meeting. The building smelled of coffee and fresh paint. Mrs. Carter, a warm woman with kind eyes, greeted Lily as if she were an old friend. I'm here to listen, Mrs. Carter said. Nothing more. For the next hour, Lily asked cautious questions about medical support, housing programs, schooling. Mrs. Carter answered patiently, never pushing. By the end of the meeting, some of the tension had eased from Lily's shoulders. Back in the car, Lily stared out the window. She wasn't like the people I've met before, she admitted softly. She actually cared. Mark gave a small smile. Told you she was good. As the weeks passed, Lily began to help around the house. She folded laundry, cooked simple meals, and even helped Ben with his school projects. Mark noticed how naturally she fit into their lives, as though she had always belonged there. One evening, she prepared a pot of vegetable soup. The smell of onions and herbs filled the kitchen. Ben hovered nearby, eager to taste test. You're a better cook than me, Mark said, taking a spoonful. Don't tell anyone, Lily teased, a shy smile breaking across her face. Ben grinned. She should stay forever, Dad. Mark's heart tightened at the boy's innocent words. He knew nothing was that simple. Lily still faced a future filled with choices and challenges, but he couldn't deny the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, this unexpected family could remain connected. A few days later, a winter storm swept across the city. Snow piled high and schools closed early. Mark came home to find Lily sitting on the couch with a notebook in her lap. Planning something? He asked. She nodded. I think I want to finish school after the baby is born. Maybe train to be a nurse. I liked science when I was little. Mark's face brightened. That's a wonderful idea. You'd be great at it. It feels big, she admitted. But I don't want my baby to grow up thinking I gave up. You're stronger than you know, Mark said. And you won't be alone. Her eyes softened. You've done so much for me already. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, Mark replied. Just keep moving forward. That night, as the storm howled outside, Mark stood by the window, watching snow swirl beneath the streetlights. Behind him, Ben slept soundly and Lily rested on the couch, her hands gently cradling her stomach. Mark thought of Laura, how she would have welcomed Lily with open arms. He felt her presence like a quiet blessing in the room. Life had shifted in ways he never expected. The grief that once defined his days now shared space with something new. Purpose. Caring for Lily and her unborn child had awakened a part of him he thought he had lost. He didn't know what the next months would bring. But as the storm raged and the small house held fast against the wind, Mark felt a certainty settle deep within him. This young girl, once left in the cold, was no longer just a guest. She was becoming part of their story, one he hoped would last far beyond the winter. March crept in with icy winds and gray skies. Chicago's winter still held its grip, but inside Mark Reynolds' duplex there was a steady rhythm of warmth and care. Lily had now lived with Mark and Ben for nearly 2 months. What began as a single night of kindness had quietly become a household of 3, soon to be 4. Each morning, Mark rose early for work at the warehouse. Before leaving, he checked on Lily, who was now moving slower as her belly grew heavy. Ben often sat beside her at the kitchen table, telling stories about school or reading aloud from his comic books. Their easy chatter filled the house with a kind of light that Mark hadn't felt in years. One chilly Saturday, Lily lowered herself onto the couch with a sigh. "I feel like a balloon," she said, brushing hair from her face. "You look great," Ben answered quickly. "Like a balloon full of awesome," she laughed, the sound ringing through the room. Mark, watching from the kitchen, felt a swell of affection. This was no longer a fragile stranger. Lily had become family. As her due date neared, Mark arranged regular visits with Mrs. Carter, the social worker, and the doctor at the community clinic. Lily listened carefully to every piece of advice: how to breathe during labor, how to swaddle a newborn, how to care for herself. Yet beneath her calm surface, Mark sensed a quiet worry. One evening, after Ben had gone to bed, she finally shared it. "What if I'm not ready?" she whispered, staring at her hands. "What if I can't give this baby the life it deserves?" Mark sat across from her, his voice steady. "No one feels completely ready. I didn't when Ben was born. But love finds a way. And you're not alone." Her eyes softened. "You've done so much for me. I don't know how to repay you." "You already have," Mark said. "You remind me that hope can show up when we least expect it." The night Lily went into labor began quietly. Snowflakes floated past the window as Mark finished washing the dinner dishes. Ben worked on a puzzle at the table. Then Lily gasped, gripping the edge of the couch. "Something's happening," she said, her face tightening. Mark hurried to her side. "Are you feeling contractions?" She nodded, breathing fast. "They're close together." Mark grabbed the hospital bag they had prepared while Ben fetched Lily's coat. Within minutes they were on the road, the world outside wrapped in white. The city streets glistened under streetlights as Mark drove carefully through the falling snow. At the hospital, nurses greeted them with calm efficiency. Lily was settled in a room, her face pale but determined. Mark stayed at her side, holding her hand as the hours passed. Ben waited with Mrs. Carter, who had rushed to meet them. Through the long night, Mark offered quiet encouragement, counting breaths, wiping her brow, whispering that she was stronger than she knew. He remembered Laura's labor with Ben, the same mix of fear and wonder. A deep respect filled him for the courage this young girl carried. Just before dawn, the sound of a newborn's cry pierced the quiet. Lily's eyes filled with tears as the nurse placed a tiny baby girl in her arms. The infant's dark hair was damp, her small fingers curling like delicate petals. "She's beautiful," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. Mark felt his own eyes sting. "She sure is," he said softly. Hours later, Ben tiptoed into the room with Mrs. Carter. His eyes widened at the sight of the baby. "She's so small," he said, barely above a whisper. Lily smiled, tired but glowing. "Do you want to meet her?" Ben nodded eagerly. With careful hands, Lily let him hold the baby, supporting the tiny head as Mark had shown him. The infant blinked up at her new world, and Ben grinned as if he'd been given a precious secret. "What's her name?" he asked. Lily looked thoughtful. "I've been thinking of Grace," she said. "Because that's what this feels like, Grace." Mark repeated the name softly. Grace. Perfect. The next 2 days passed in a gentle blur of nurses' visits, soft cries, and quiet moments. Lily held Grace close, whispering promises of love and safety. Mark stayed nearby, fetching water, changing diapers when Lily's arms grew tired, and making sure Ben felt included in every small milestone. One evening, as the hospital settled into nighttime stillness, Lily looked at Mark with serious eyes. "You didn't have to do any of this," she said. "But you did. You gave me a home when no one else would." "I'll never forget it," Mark shook his head. "You gave us something too. You brought life back into our house. You reminded me how strong family can be even when it's not planned." Tears shimmered in Lily's eyes. "You're more than a friend. You're like..." She paused, searching for the word. "Like the father I never had." Mark swallowed hard. "And you're like the daughter I never expected. You and Grace are part of us now, no matter what." When the hospital released them, the world outside glittered with new snow. Mark carried Grace carefully to the car while Lily followed, her steps slow but steady. Ben skipped ahead, eager to show his friends the tiny miracle waiting at home. Back at the duplex, Mark had prepared a small corner of the living room for the baby, a crib borrowed from a neighbor, soft blankets, and a mobile that played a gentle tune. Lily stood silently for a moment, taking it all in. You didn't have to do this, she said again. Mark smiled. Of course I did. You and Grace belong here. As evening settled, the house filled with quiet sounds. The crackle of the radiator, Ben's soft humming, the baby's delicate breaths. Mark watched Lily cradle Grace and felt something he hadn't felt in years, a deep, unshakable peace. Later that night, after Ben was asleep and Grace finally drifted into a gentle slumber, Mark stood at the window. Snowflakes shimmered under the streetlight. He thought of Laura, imagining her smile and the way she would have welcomed Lily and the baby without question. Life had taken a path he never planned, from grief to unexpected family, from lonely nights to a home full of new beginnings. Behind him, Lily whispered to the sleeping baby, her words soft but sure. You are loved.
You're safe.
You are our miracle. Mark closed his eyes, the sound of her voice wrapping around him like a blessing. In that quiet moment, he understood that this house, once heavy with loss, had become a place of healing. Grace's arrival was more than a birth. It was proof that hope could bloom even in the coldest winter. Spring sunlight stretched across Chicago's rooftops, melting the last gray piles of snow. Inside Mark Reynolds' small brick duplex, the change of season felt like a quiet celebration. The house that once echoed with loneliness now hummed with gentle sounds. Baby Grace's soft coos, Ben's cheerful chatter, and the steady rhythm of Lily moving through each day as a new mother. Morning with Grace, Mark awoke to the faint cry of the baby just after dawn. He padded downstairs to find Lily in the rocker, Grace nestled against her chest. The newborn's tiny fingers clutched Lily's shirt, her breathing slow and even. Lily looked up with a tired but radiant smile. She finally went back to sleep, she whispered. Mark poured a cup of coffee and leaned on the doorframe. You're doing great, he said. Better than I ever managed when Ben was that small. Lily laughed quietly. I don't know about that. I think she just likes the sound of my heartbeat. You're her world, Mark replied. That's what matters. Ben soon tumbled downstairs, hair messy from sleep, eager to peek at the baby. He kissed Grace's forehead and then sat at the table with his cereal, asking Lily a dozen questions about feeding schedules and baby milestones. His curiosity made Lily grin despite the fatigue in her eyes. For Mark, these small moments, coffee steam rising, morning light through the curtains, the gentle rhythm of family life, were a gift he never expected to receive again. Facing the future, but beyond the warmth of their daily routine, decisions waited. Lily was still a minor. She needed a long-term plan for school, work, and a stable home. Mark knew that their arrangement, while loving, couldn't remain informal forever. One afternoon, while Grace napped and Ben worked on homework, Mark sat across from Lily at the kitchen table. Papers from the community center lay between them, forms about education programs, childcare support, and housing options. You don't have to decide everything today, Mark said carefully. But it helps to know what choices you have. Lily traced a finger over the papers. I want to finish high school, she said finally. And I keep thinking about nursing. The clinic visits, the way the nurses explained everything. I want to do that. Help people the way they helped me. Mark felt a quiet pride. You'd be wonderful at it. Her eyes flicked toward Grace's sleeping form in the next room. I just don't know how to make it all work. School, work, taking care of her. You won't do it alone, Mark said. Mrs. Carter and the community center can help. And I'll help too as long as you need. Lily looked down, her voice soft. I don't want to be a burden. You're not, Mark replied firmly. You're family now. Family helps each other. A legal step the next week, Mark accompanied Lily to meet Mrs. Carter again. The social worker explained options for guardianship, so Lily could remain in a stable environment while she finished school. Lily listened closely, asking thoughtful questions. If you'd like, Mrs. Carter said, Mark can become your legal guardian until you turn 18. It would make it easier for you to stay in this home and receive benefits. Lily's eyes widened. Is that even possible? It is, Mrs. Carter said. Only if both of you agree. Mark looked at Lily. He hadn't expected the conversation to move so quickly, but the idea felt right. Only if you're comfortable, he told her. No pressure. Lily thought for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You've been more of a parent to me than anyone else. If it means Grace and I can stay here and I can finish school, yes, I'd like that. Mark's heart swelled with quiet emotion. Then we'll make it happen. Over the following weeks, paperwork moved forward. There were background checks, home visits, and signatures. Through it all, Lily remained steady, her determination clear. She was not just accepting help. She was building a foundation for her daughter's future. Everyday Triumph's life settled into a new pattern. Mark worked early shifts and came home to help with evening feedings. Ben learned how to warm bottles and change diapers, wearing his super uncle title with pride. Lily attended evening tutoring sessions while Mrs. Carter arranged childcare at the center. Grace grew stronger, her bright eyes following every sound. Small moments became victories. The first time Grace rolled over, Ben clapped so loudly she startled. Lily laughed until tears ran down her cheeks. When Lily received her first report card from her resumed classes, a string of solid grades, Mark taped it to the refrigerator like a trophy. One warm afternoon, they all walked to the neighborhood park. Grace slept in the stroller while Ben showed Lily the best swings. Mark watched them beneath budding trees, feeling the simple joy of belonging. The weight of grief that had shadowed him since Laura's death continued to lift, replaced by something bright and steady. A challenge arrives. Not every day was easy. There were sleepless nights, fussy feedings, and the occasional worry about money. Mark sometimes came home bone-tired from the warehouse, his hands aching from hours of lifting boxes. Yet when he opened the door to Grace's happy coos and Ben's eager stories, the fatigue softened. One evening, a letter arrived from Lily's mother. The envelope was thin, the handwriting shaky. Lily sat at the table, staring at it for a long time before opening it. Inside, a short note apologized for the harsh words months ago and asked to meet the baby. Lily's emotions tangled. Hurt, hope, fear. "I don't know if I can see her," she admitted. "You don't have to decide right now," Mark said gently. "You can choose what's best for you and Grace." After a long pause, Lily tucked the letter into a drawer. "Maybe later," she whispered. "When I'm ready." Mark respected her choice. Healing, he knew, moved at its own pace. Signs of strength by early summer, Lily had found her rhythm. She balanced classes, childcare, and part-time hours at the community center. Her confidence grew each week. She learned to swaddle Grace with expert speed, to laugh at midnight feedings, to ask for help when she needed it. One evening, after Ben had gone to bed and Grace slept peacefully, Mark and Lily sat on the porch as a warm breeze carried the scent of cut grass. "You've changed so much since that night at the bus stop," Mark said quietly. Lily smiled, her eyes thoughtful. "I was lost, scared. I didn't think anyone would care what happened to me, but you and Ben showed me what family can be." Mark looked at her, the porch light casting a gentle glow across her face. "You showed us too. You brought new life into this home, literally and in spirit." Lily's voice softened. "Sometimes I think Laura must have sent you to me." Mark felt a lump in his throat. He rarely spoke of his late wife, but tonight the thought felt comforting. "Maybe she did," he said. They sat in silence, listening to the distant hum of the city, the night wrapping around them like a quiet blessing, a celebration of Grace as Grace's first summer approached. The family planned a small celebration for her 3-month milestone. Neighbors and friends from the community center gathered in the backyard with balloons and simple food. Ben proudly showed off the decorations he had helped hang. Lily, wearing a light blue dress, carried Grace from guest to guest, her pride unmistakable. Mrs. Carter gave a short toast. "This little girl," she said, "reminds us how love can grow in unexpected places, and how families can form in ways we never predict." Mark stood beside Lily, his heart full. He thought of the freezing night months earlier, when he had first seen her shivering at the bus stop. That single act of stopping to ask if she was okay had changed all their lives. When the guests left and the backyard quieted, Lily looked at Mark with shining eyes. "Thank you," she said again, her voice steady. "Not just for taking me in, but for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." Mark placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You did the hard work. You built this life." Lily glanced at Grace, sleeping peacefully in Ben's arms. "We built it," she said softly. That night, as twilight painted the sky with streaks of gold and violet, Mark stood at the porch rail. Ben laughed softly inside the house while Lily hummed to the baby. For the first time since Laura's passing, Mark felt complete. Their home wasn't defined by blood or by perfect plans. It was defined by the quiet choice to love and protect one another, He realized that the miracle wasn't only Grace's birth. It was the way 3 separate lives had found each other, shaping a family that no one could have predicted, but that felt exactly right. Autumn crept into Chicago with a soft golden light and the scent of falling leaves. 4 years had passed since the winter night when Mark Reynolds had first seen Lily shivering at the bus stop. In those years, the small brick house had grown warmer, livelier, and somehow bigger, as if the walls themselves had stretched to hold the love inside. Morning in a busy house. Mark woke before sunrise, as always. From the hallway he could already hear a gentle buzz of life, the clatter of dishes, the cheerful hum of a tune. Downstairs Ben, now a tall teenager, poured cereal for his little sister Grace, who was nearly 4 and full of endless questions. "Daddy, why do leaves fall?" she asked as Ben placed a small bowl of fruit in front of her. "So the trees can sleep," Mark said with a grin. "Kind of like a bedtime for nature." Grace giggled. "Trees need blankets too." "Maybe," Ben said, ruffling her hair. "A blanket of snow." The kitchen door opened and Lily stepped in, her nursing school jacket slung over one shoulder. She carried a stack of textbooks and a thermos of coffee. Her hair was pulled into a neat bun, but a loose strand framed her face. She looked confident, grown, and entirely at home. "Good morning," she said, kissing Grace on the cheek. "Is my favorite little helper ready for preschool?" Grace nodded, mouth full of fruit. Lily gave Mark a bright smile. "I have an early lab today, but I'll be back before dinner." Mark watched her with quiet pride. She had finished high school with honors and earned a scholarship for nursing. He thought of the frightened teenager he had met years ago and felt a swell of gratitude. She had built a life of her own while never forgetting the home they had made together. Signs of growth. After breakfast, Mark drove Grace to preschool. On the way, she chattered about the class pet, a goldfish named Captain Bubbles. Mark answered each question with patient amusement. Dropping her off, he noticed how the teachers greeted her by name, how other children ran to hold her hand. Grace radiated warmth. She belonged everywhere. When Mark returned home, Lily was already gone for her classes and Ben had left for school. The house stood quiet for a moment and Mark paused in the hallway, listening to the faint ticking of the clock. He thought of Laura, his late wife, and whispered a silent thank you for the unexpected family that had grown here. The letter arrives that afternoon. The mail brought a surprise. Among the bills and flyers lay a soft cream envelope addressed to Lily. Mark placed it on the counter, noticing the elegant handwriting. When Lily returned, tired but happy from her long day at the nursing lab, she opened it carefully. Her eyes widened. "It's from my mother," she said. Mark waited, giving her space. Lily read silently, then spoke. "She's been sober for over a year. She's in counseling. She wants to visit. She says she'd like to meet Grace if we're willing." Her voice trembled with a mixture of hope and fear. Mark placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "What do you want?" "I think..." Lily hesitated, then nodded. "I think I'm ready to see her." The meeting a week later on a cool Saturday, Lily's mother, Elaine, arrived. She looked older than Lily remembered, lines around her eyes, silver threads in her hair. But there was a steadiness in her gaze that hadn't been there before. She carried no grand gifts, only a small bouquet of wildflowers. Grace peeked out from behind Mark's leg, curious. Elaine knelt to meet her at eye level. "Hello, Grace," she said softly. "I'm your grandma." Grace blinked, then offered a shy smile. "Do you like goldfish?" Elaine laughed, a sound both fragile and hopeful. "I love goldfish." The afternoon passed in gentle conversation. Elaine apologized to Lily, not in rushed words, but in a quiet, steady way that felt real. Lily listened, sometimes with tears, sometimes with cautious questions. Grace played nearby, her laughter a soft soundtrack of forgiveness. When Elaine finally left, Lily hugged her for a long moment. "I'm glad you came," she whispered. Mark watched from the doorway, his heart warm. Healing, he realized, often arrived in small steps. A new celebration winter approached again, marking nearly 5 years since Lily had entered their lives. Mark suggested a holiday gathering, a way to bring together the people who had helped them on their journey. Neighbors, Mrs. Carter from the community center, teachers, and close friends. On the evening of the party, the house sparkled with soft lights. The scent of cinnamon and roasted vegetables filled the air. Ben helped Grace hang paper snowflakes in the windows. Lily arranged plates of cookies on the table, her movements confident and calm. Guests arrived with hugs and laughter. Mrs. Carter brought a scrapbook of photos from the first months of Grace's life. "Look how tiny she was," she said, flipping through pages of memories. Lily held Grace on her lap as friends shared stories of the early days, the bus stop, the first community center appointments, the late-night feedings. Mark stood behind them, his heart swelling. These were not just visitors. They were the threads of a chosen family. Quiet moments of reflection. Later that night, when the guests had gone and Ben was upstairs reading to Grace, Lily found Mark on the porch. Snowflakes drifted under the streetlight, soft and slow. "You built all this," she said quietly. Mark shook his head. "We built it. You, me, Ben, Grace, everyone who helped along the way." Lily leaned on the railing beside him. "I used to think I had no future. Now I see so much ahead. Finishing nursing school, maybe working at the children's hospital. And Grace, she's growing up with so much love." Mark smiled, his breath visible in the cold air. "You gave me a future, too. Before you came, I felt like my life had stopped. You reminded me that it could keep going." For a long moment they stood together, the silence filled with shared understanding. Family wasn't about perfect plans. It was about the choice to stay, to love, to build something steady even when the world felt uncertain. Graduation day. 2 years later, on a bright spring morning, Lily walked across a stage in a pale blue cap and gown. Mark sat in the audience with Ben and Grace clapping until his hands ached. When Lily accepted her nursing diploma, she looked toward them with shining eyes. After the ceremony, Grace ran into her arms. "Mommy, you did it." Lily hugged her daughter tightly. "We did it," she whispered. Mark stepped forward, pride overflowing. "Your hard work got you here," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You never let me quit," Lily replied. "You and Ben gave me the strength to keep going." They celebrated with a simple picnic in the park, sandwiches, lemonade, and the laughter of children playing nearby. The wind carried the scent of new blossoms, a reminder of how far they had all come. A home that last years flowed gently onward. Lily began working at the children's hospital, her calm presence comforting frightened parents and little patients. Grace grew into a curious schoolgirl, bright and fearless. Ben finished high school and entered college, still the protective big brother who made Grace giggle with silly jokes. Mark watched them with gratitude. His once quiet house was now a place of constant motion. Late-night study sessions, birthday parties, weekend movie marathons. He found joy in every moment, from Grace's artwork taped to the fridge to the quiet evenings when they all shared stories around the table. One evening, as they gathered for dinner, Lily raised a glass of sparkling cider. "To family," she said. "The kind we choose and the kind we build." Mark met her gaze and lifted his own glass. "To family," he echoed. Grace clinked her cup against theirs. "To us." Laughter filled the room, warm and bright. Full circle, on the anniversary of that fateful winter night, Mark walked with Lily and Grace to the old bus stop. Snow dusted the sidewalk and the streetlight flickered gently. Grace held each of their hands, skipping between them. "This is where you met Mommy?" Grace asked. "Yes," Mark said. "It's where everything changed." Lily looked around, her eyes soft with memory. "I was so scared that night," she said. "But I found a home. I found all of you." Mark squeezed her hand. "And I found you." They stood together in the quiet evening, the past and present folding into each other. The cold no longer felt sharp. Instead, it carried the warmth of a miracle, one born not of chance but of kindness, resilience, and love. As they turned toward home, Grace ran ahead, her laughter ringing through the crisp air. Mark and Lily followed side by side, their steps sure and steady. The road behind them held struggle and sorrow, but the path ahead glowed with promise. What had begun as an act of compassion had become a life filled with purpose and joy. A living testament that families are not only born, they are made one brave choice at a time.